Regarding men, number 36, sex doll equals child rape.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul Elam here with a voice for men and an ear for men, joined as always by the wonderful Janice Fiamingo from the Fiamingo File and Tom Golden of menaregood.com.
Not wonderful?
No, yeah,
Lot
just
today.
good, just good. I know your feelings are hurt. That's okay. We've got a doll for you to play with.
Oh boy.
Oh no.
Tell me about it.
Absolutely. So, folks, we're talking today about legislation that has come up in Australia, federal legislation that has come up casting the sex doll industry into peril, at least in that country, because they are going to start prosecuting, they say, men who purchase sex dolls that are childlike. As a crime akin somewhat to pedophilia. So now sex with an inanimate object is going to be, I mean, we just had a discussion on giving sexual robots rights. This takes this to the next level in a very, very crazy way, I think. The first thing that popped into my mind is that this is a good way to increase attacks, sexual attacks on children. We know from research, and we will provide it in the low, and I have several studies that demonstrate that the availability of pornography actually has a very positive correlation to a decrease in sexual crimes, depending on where that is. And this has been statistically measured. There is statistically significant results that demonstrate that there's a causal relationship, that increased sexual release, another way to say pornography, increased sexual release for men results in fewer sexual assaults.
Right.
There's two problems. So there's two problems with this legislation in my mind. One, let's say three problems. One, it's just insane to legislate what happens between a human being and an inanimate object. That in and of itself is a special brand of crazy. But the legislation also says that a sex doll, even one with large breasts and makeup, can be considered a child. One again, it's not a child, folks. It's a piece of silicone. The other thing is that what they're saying with this is that regardless of the appearance of the sex doll, that this is going to be a criminal act, that the state can come after the individual for a child sex crime, something that is one of the worst thing a man can ever be accused of, convicted of, whatever, is just the absolute worst. So the Australian government, I think, as a proxy for feminists in Australia who want to control men sexually, is passing this law that is just as Orwellian as you can possibly imagine. There's a lot to unpack about that, but I've started this off and I'll pass it off to Tom or Janice, whoever wants to go next with their thoughts on this craziness down under.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, and this is very serious legislation too. I think if I'm remembering correctly, a man could serve up to 9 years in prison for possessing one of these dolls. I mean, the mind boggles. This is going to be then the end of that man's life. He'll be branded a convicted pedophile for possessing one of these dolls, perhaps with the intention of never ever touching a child. And yeah, I mean, feminists have been up in arms about sex dolls, period, for years, and have made absolutely no distinction between the fact that this is a physical, non-human object, a silicone object, and the fact that there's something that they call objectification that happens, supposedly always the man doing it to the woman. And so they see, there's just a clear one-to-one correlation between the use of dolls and the objectification, and therefore, ability to practice violence on women and girls. And there is no clear evidence to show that is the case. It's just like the claim about violent video games and violence. It's something that feels right to a significant portion of the population, those who have been marinated in feminist ideology, especially in the understanding of male sexuality as innately objectifying, dehumanizing, damaging, violent. So therefore, all of these kinds of claims can be made without any evidence, and as we see, legislation can be passed. I was reading an article by somebody named Rick Brown, who I assume is a criminologist. It's called Exploring the Implications of Child Sex Dolls. It's in a magazine, a journal called Trends and Issues in Crime and Criminal Justice from 2019. And his whole argument rests on a feminist assumption, and he admits that it's unproven, but he goes ahead anyway. Says, this is from the abstract, although currently unproven, it is possible that use of child sex dolls may lead to escalation in child sex offenses. So he's talking about potential harm. And as you've said, Paul, it is more possible that the use of child sex dolls will not lead to escalation, will lead to de-escalation in actual child sex offenses. And yet he doesn't even consider that in this article.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of the general demonization of anything to do with men, their very being. I mean, I had a friend who just recently was taking pictures of a swimming pool at the new building where he was living. And right away, within, his just getting out there with a camera, a security guard came and told him that he wasn't allowed to take pictures of the swimming pool because a woman had complained that she and her daughter, didn't want their picture taken, because it was assumed, of course, that he was going to use those pictures for some nefarious purpose. At least he wasn't hauled away by the police. One knows that maybe there have been cases where a woman has been similarly told that she can't take a picture of a swimming pool, but I really doubt it. It's the fallback assumption is always that only men are sex perverts and perpetrators of sexual violence, and that all men are, at least potentially.
Yeah, I see this whole thing as being the legislative gynocentrism Olympics.
Yeah.
It's like the legislators are kissing the butts of feminists in order to get reelected. If only I do exactly what they asked me to do, then maybe I'll increase the chances of getting elected again. It's really disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
How people have gotten to the point where they aren't really thinking about what the legislation does, and what the ramifications may be for people. They're thinking only about maybe if I do this, I'll get reelected, because that's the only thing I can think of as a reason for putting out this kind of crap. It's just silly.
Mm-hmm.
It's silly.
I think there's also the phenomena of what about the childrenism?
Right.
I mean,
And
how can you possibly say there might be something positive to childlike sex toys? To advocate for something like that, I understand why the gentleman that Janice mentioned said, well, I've got no proof, but this, for all we know, this is going to harm more children, and would not even entertain the idea of the opposite. What would happen to him if he said, hey, let's look at the possibility that maybe these sexual objects for pedophiles may actually be a help? Oh my God, the feminist lobby would lose their mind. So would the traditionalist lobby. They would go absolutely crazy. The same group of people that say, if you listen to Motley Crue backwards, you'll find messages from the devil. or that same mentality is at play here in people. There's something inherently evil about this. So let's not think about it. Whatever we do, don't give this, critical thought.
Yeah.
Just automatically child sex toy bad, no matter, even if it ends up harming children, to think that way.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, in the case of any legislators they are not going, once this kind of a bill gets introduced, the chances that it will be opposed are very, very tiny, because
Right.
nobody wants to be the person who opposes such a bill. Then they're going to be branded for the rest of their political career, perhaps, as somebody who is in favor of the sexual exploitation of children. So, so all sorts of bills like this are likely going to be introduced and almost certainly passed over the coming years. And as feminists get it into their heads to do research on this subject, we can imagine that, guess what? They will find
Of course.
clear connections between the use of these dolls and the actual exploitation of children. And, well, we know that in academia already, the feminist lockdown on actual serious objective research is so complete that almost nothing can get past the feminist radar.
Right.
And any researcher who will find findings that feminists don't like will also be demonized and hounded out of his position, and find himself shut out of conferences and opportunities to publish and everything else. So it's almost guaranteed that soon there will be some research. Everyone will seize on it. It will be endlessly cited. Doesn't matter whether the research was well done or founded in real fact. And pretty soon we'll have every legislature in the Western world enacting similar legislation, and all sorts of men who have sex dolls that happen to have a childlike look about them will find themselves hunted down. I think it's amazing. It's very scary.
Yeah, one of the things that you said, Paul, about the sex dolls was that the legislation basically says that large breasts and what was the other thing?
Makeup.
And makeup doesn't disqualify the robot or the sex toy as being not childlike. It's like, okay, wait a minute. And the important thing there is that there's a whole lot of gray about which sex robots are going to be children and which aren't.
Mm-hmm.
That'll largely be up to prosecutors. And we all know that prosecutors are moral, upstanding people who never go after men for sex crimes unless they righteously had it coming.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. No,
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and of course, it's never extended, in a gender equal kind of direction. There's never any concern expressed about female sexual violence and the correlation. Nobody would even investigate it, I don't suppose.
Right.
Between women's use of sex toys and women's sexual abuse of children.
Yes.
Nobody even talks about it. Nobody worries about, the use of sex toys that have male characteristics that might equally be shared with child males, or anything like that. I mean, this is well outside my area of expertise. I don't know anything about it, but lots of women do make use of sex toys of various sorts, and they're the idea that those would be subject to similar legislation, that women would be prosecuted and imprisoned for the use of such things, of course, is ridiculous. And yet we know the objective research does show that women do sexually abuse men and boys, and but somehow we close our eyes to that fact entirely.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anything in the legislation that talks about a male child doll with an erect penis. And if the woman uses that, would she be under the same kind of?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Absolutely not.
Well, they even for the purpose, if you read through the legislation, we have it linked below, you'll see they never even entertain the idea that there is male sex dolls. And there are. That's part of the market out there now. But none of that's discussed. It all describes female-only attributes. This is legislation targeted directly at men when women are doing the same exact thing. I also think it's very interesting too, and it sort of shows how much difficulty we have in society having honest discussions. For instance, we're talking about the possibility that these sex dolls might reduce, assaults against children. that they might have that impact, that at least it's worth looking at in terms of studies. We'll never do it because we can't have an honest discussion, nor can we have an honest discussion about neoteny and sexual attraction.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is very real stuff. We are wired as a species, whether our Victorian sensibilities like it or not, we are wired as a species to be attracted to the artifacts of youth.
Yeah.
Boy, the room can get real quiet when you start talking
Yeah.
about
And
that.
and a bunch
Amen.
of moralizers haranguing about it and saying that it shouldn't be so, and that it's somehow connected to patriarchy or social conditioning, or that it's all socially conditioned. You know, we're
Everything.
taught, men
Everything.
are taught that that's what they should like, and they just need to be taught differently. Yeah, I mean, you know, and we're in the grips of that kind of madness where we can't actually talk about the fact that human beings are animals. We're very sophisticated animals, but we are also animals, and that some of our urges cannot simply be talked away. Yeah. That's,
Or legislated
or
away.
legislated
really.
away, indeed. Yeah. Yeah. Just what's going to happen is more men, yet more men. It's already 97.9%. More men will be in prison. And
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right. Yeah, you know,
Say that
those
like it's a bad thing, Janice.
mm-hmm, yeah, merely for purchasing a doll. I mean,
Those-
it's incredible.
big red primate butts are all socialized.
Mm-hmm,
You
yeah,
know, the
yeah.
guys
Absolutely.
aren't attracted to those.
Mm-hmm,
Oh boy, those
Yeah.
big red lips.
yeah.
Same thing, guys.
Apparently,
Yeah.
patriarchy was alive and well in early hominids.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It's absolute insanity. And this
Oh,
is
boy.
what feminists have always done, is try to legislate and create social pressure that works against human nature.
Mm-hmm,
If you see this throughout, their ideas, everything is about shutting down what's natural between men and women, what's natural behavior for men, what's natural behavior for women. They want to legislate against all of that. They want to demonize all of it. This is why we see feminists demonizing the idea of motherhood, or
Yes.
of even of being a homemaker and
Yes.
wife,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is a perfectly wonderful thing for anybody to do.
mm-hmm.
They want to turn that into some sort of failure for women. But
Yes.
everywhere we have human nature, we have feminists working against it. And I don't think anybody's ever written on this extensively, but I wish they would. I wish one of our great academics out there would go after this subject. But feminism seems to be at its very root anti-human.
It is. Yeah. It doesn't believe there is such a thing as human nature. It
Right.
believes that it can be infinitely remolded according to a feminist utopian script. Of course, it's a very dystopian script. And yeah, they absolutely, they would laugh at your notion that there's such a thing as human nature.
Yep.
That's just a ruse of the patriarchy, Paul. Of
Indeed.
course
Yes,
you'd
I
say
know.
that.
I've been duped.
And
Yeah.
Paul, as those feminists pushed that legislation over and over and over again, the male legislators refused to say no.
Exactly. Yeah.
Over and over and
Mhm.
over again.
Yeah.
Because
So really,
that
it's not just the
too
feminists who are at
is
fault
human
here.
nature.
Mhm.
Unfortunately.
Yes, it's
Exactly.
gynocentrism.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take
Yeah.
care of her.
Yeah. I know. I mean,
She's-
it's so ironic, isn't it? Yeah.
She's tied to the tracks. I'll come in and untie her quick before the train gets here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Fear
And
not, Nell.
Yeah. Exactly. And even as they're acting in ways that they are biologically programmed to act, they're accepting, and many men do, especially younger men, do accept that human nature doesn't exist and that it is all social conditioning. It's amazing. Yeah.
As we
Works
destroy
perfectly.
our culture.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, if anything, it is a great lesson in understanding that what does set us aside is our capacity to rise above some of our programming and to act
Mhm.
more consciously.
Yes.
Mhm.
You know, human programming and nature is great, but it also tells me if Tom has a cheeseburger and I'm starving, to hit him on the head with a rock and take his cheeseburger. So we do elevate above that for very good reasons.
Yes, we do. We have, yeah.
I'd share it.
Better, but it works better when we work with human nature at the same time.
Yes.
Not to deny that it exists,
Yes.
so that two people can have a cheeseburger or can share it, rather than saying that one person must deny his desire for the cheeseburger, from now until the end of time. Anyway, yeah.
My cheeseburger desire is just patriarchy in action.
Yeah. Well, they're going after your red meat too. I mean, that's another subject, veganism and feminism. But anyway, yeah. So I think we're probably about time we should give our awards here. Yes.
I wonder who gets the humanitarian. That's a tough one for this.
I'm nominating Matt McMullen, the CEO of Real Dolls Incorporated, for putting sex dolls and sexual robotics on the map market-wise. I think it's a good thing ultimately. I think it's something that's going to be an increasingly popular option for men in this sort of crazy gynocentric world where MGTOW is one of the best possible options they can take in life, is to have these things available. So I give McMullen the humanitarian award.
I second that.
Okay.
Good for you,
me
Matt.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
to the authors of the legislation in Australia, with your determination that a man who purchases a sex doll and doesn't hurt any child or any woman in the process can face up to 9 years in prison if some judge determines that has childlike characteristics. Well, those are the winners of our PUTA award.
They are the PUTA.
Very ill-advised.
Oh man, that's crazy stuff.
I think honestly, maybe we ought to have a flying mangina award too, because I have a feeling this was a group of men behind this legislation.
Well, Paul, what would it look like?
Probably
the same as a PUTA.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Flying mangina. I like that idea, but I had some fantasies about what it could be. I won't share right now, but
I think those fantasies are illegal, Tom.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be a surprise.
Pretty soon. Yeah, pretty soon we're going to be jailing people for their fantasies too.
Yeah, really. I should shut up.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all be in trouble?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps it up.
That wraps it up.
Does.
For this regarding men.
Men
are
good.
Indeed, they are.
Thank you all for your support.
Yes, indeed.
See you later.
Take good care.